So we're going to move on to your professional career, and obviously this is a rock podcast, so we like to hear about the big name rock acts that you've worked with, and you've worked with so many. We listed them earlier. What I want to start with, though, is an album that doesn't get talked about very often at all at the moment, but the guy himself is obviously a huge superstar. I'm talking about David Coverdale's debut solo record. He just left Deep Purple. The album itself was called Whitesnake, was where he took the name for the band afterwards, and you appeared on that. So again, how did you get involved with that one, and what do you remember of David from that time?
Well, actually, that was Roger Glover. Roger Glover was the producer of that album. And it was all the same year, 1976. So I had been, by that time, I started doing sessions in 73. So I had been to pretty much most of the studios around London and started to play on more rock and roll albums as opposed to doing jingles and, straighter sessions. And so there's various contractors at that time around London, and they would book you for sessions. And I was booked by Mountain Fjord, which is more of a rock and roll type session contractor. He would book string sessions for Elton John and various musicians for. Kiki D, various, more rock and roll type things. I'm trying to remember names, and Roger wanted to do a solo album, but he was looking for a drummer. And so he called one of the guys at Mountain Fjord, and straight away they said, "Oh, Simon Phillips." Oh, okay. No, I haven't heard of him. I said, "Well, he's kind of new on the scene. He's very young." Oh, okay. So anyway, I was asked to go to Roger's house to meet him. And so I drive out to Buckingham and I go to this big rock star's house, I'm like, oh, wow, and I, ding dong or whatever it was, knock, knock. And he opens the door and he's looking at me and he's told me this story so many times. He said, yeah, I opened the door and there's this spotty kid out there. And I said, yeah, I'm Simon. He said, well, you better come in. And he didn't know whether to ask me if I wanted a cup of tea or an orange squash and a nice lolly. So I said, I'll have a cup of tea, Got any biscuits? And we're chatting and blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, look, come through to the studio and let's play. And I guess he must have called John Lord. He said, John, come on round. And because I think they all lived fairly close to each other, Ian and both Ians, he had a little Ludwig drum kit there, so I sat down on it and he picked up his bass, and then John came in, and I'm going, I think that's John Lord. Bloody hell, I've got half of Deep Purple here. This is great, and we're just jamming, and they're kind of looking at each other, going, wow. And that was it. He said, right, come to Munich and let's make a record. And it was really from that he started booking me for all the people that he was producing. And one was David Coverdale. One was Barbie Benton, one of Hugh Hefner's girls. And one, of course, was Michael Schenker. So if that was later, that was in 1980. So that's how the Whitesnake album happened, and we recorded at Kingsway Recorders. Mickey Moody, Tim Hinckley, Delal Harper playing bass, and David was larger than life and hilarious. And the one thing I knew hanging out with the Deep Purple guys, they were all hilarious people, really funny. Martin Birch was the engineer. He was funny. John Lord would come round, and of course, Pete York, who was a big friend of theirs, especially in Munich, he lived there. The whole session would just grind to a halt with the comedy, really funny. And David was absolutely wonderful. We had a great time. I think we made a great record.
Yeah, it's a really interesting record because there's a lot of mix of styles on there, isn't it? It's not just a straightforward kind of blues rock or anything. There's lots of different elements to it. So it is a really interesting record.
Yeah. No, it was lovely. And it was a really fun record, and yeah, I remember it well. Absolutely, yeah.
So is that kind of
David did ask me to join the band.
Okay.
It was so we did this in '76. It was around the summertime, and then he was forming the band at the beginning of '77, and he called me. He said, "Yeah, I'd like you to play with Whitesnake," you know. And I said, "Well, David, I can't. I've signed to Robert Stigwood organization to play with Jack Bruce." And that was all happening in the same year. '76 was the biggest year in terms of doing records. During COVID, I spent some time going through my old diaries, which luckily were saved from the fire that I had. And I had all my diaries from 1973 up until when I left England, so 92.
Oh.
And I tried to put together all the recording sessions, all the albums that I played on for these years. And when I got to '76, it's just Excel sheets. It's ridiculous. And I remember, you know, the alarm would go off. I used to have a tease made. Don't even remember what that is.
Yeah.
And you could hear the boiling water, and so automatic tea, because I'd have to get up real quick, get in the car, and drive to a studio. And I was so tired, I'd start driving to the wrong studio. And I was living with back at my mom's house then. It was in Hertfordshire, so I had to. There were various routes to get to different parts of London, and I'm halfway, and I was like, "Where am I going? Oh shit! No, I got to go to Lansdowne. It's you know, I've got to go to EMI." Yeah, I mean, every day, pretty much three studios a day for a while. It was crazy.